March 16, 1943. North Atlantic. Night swallows the horizon. Convoy HX-229 battles through 40-foot waves. 70 ships stretched across 60 miles of ocean. On the radar of German U-boat U-384 a faint echo appears. The wolf pack has found its prey. But in the next 14 days 6 U-boats will vanish. And the hunters will become the hunted. This is the story of how Allied convoys turned the tide of the Atlantic War and crushed the Nazi U-boat menace that once strangled Britain's lifeline. For Britain the sea was survival. Every gallon of fuel, every loaf of bread, every bullet had to cross the Atlantic. In 1940 German U-boats, stealthy submarines commanded by Admiral Karl Donitz, began their campaign to starve the island nation into surrender. They called it Der Atlantikschlacht. The Battle of the Atlantic. By 1942 the U-boat fleet had grown from a handful to over 300 operational subs. Their mission was simple: sink everything that floated between America and Britain. Convoys became floating graveyards. Merchant sailors died in the freezing water, often unseen, unrecorded. In January 1943 alone over 600,000 tons of shipping were lost. At this rate Britain would run out of supplies before the year's end. Churchill later admitted, the only thing that ever really frightened me during the war was the U-boat peril.
But Donitz had a weakness. His U-boats hunted in packs, but they relied on radio to coordinate. Each message sent to headquarters was a thread that could be traced. In the cold rooms of Bletchley Park British cryptanalysts had begun to break the Enigma codes that guided these wolf packs. The Allies were learning where the hunters lay. March 1943 convoys HX-229 and SC-122 depart North America within hours of each other. Between them more than 100 merchant ships. Their route would lead straight into a gathering storm, both in the weather and in war. From occupied France Admiral Donitz unleashed over 40 U-boats forming Wolfpacks Robgraf, Stürmer and Dranger. Their target these very convoys. But something had changed. The Allies were ready. Each convoy now carried new escorts. Destroyers equipped with Aztec sonar. An aircraft with radar capable of detecting a periscope in the night. The convoys were no longer helpless. March 16, 0200 hours. U-384 closes in on HX-229. Her captain Oberleutnant Walter Sitek orders a night surface attack. He sees the faint outlines of ship silhouettes against the pale moonlight. He fires 2 torpedoes. A tanker erupts in flame. The sea burns. Moments later Sitek dives deep, but something is wrong. A sharp metallic ping cuts through the water. Then a thunderous crack. The destroyer HMS Harvester has locked on. Depth charges tear the sea apart. U-384 is crushed, her hull imploding under 600 feet of pressure. 74 men gone. The first of 6 U-boats to vanish. Across the Atlantic chaos unfolds. U-665, U-468, U-523, U-384, U-600 and U-338 all lost within 2 weeks. Each met the same fate: detected, hunted and destroyed. For the first time Allied commanders had eyes beneath the surface. Aircraft like the B-24 Liberator patrolled the ocean's gaps, while destroyers formed steel shields around the convoys. The wolf pack strategy, once unstoppable, began to crumble. March 19, 1943. Convoy SC-122 southeast of Greenland. U-338 commanded by Oberleutnant Manfred Kinzel shadows the convoy at dawn. Fog cloaks the sea. He surfaces to recharge batteries, unaware that above the mist death circles. A B-24 Liberator of RAF Coastal Command spots the periscope wake. The pilot dives, releasing 6 depth charges in a perfect line. U-338 is split apart in seconds. No survivors. The hunter never saw his killer. Within days U-665 meets the same fate, detected by sonar, cornered by destroyers. The crew's last message: we are under heavy attack, position uncertain. Then silence. Behind these victories lay more than luck. It was intelligence, coordination, and new technology. Aztec sonar, once unreliable, now painted a clear picture of submarines below. Lee lights mounted on patrol aircraft turned darkness into daylight. And at Bletchley Park, codebreakers intercepted U-boat transmission sometimes before the subs themselves knew where they were going. The Allies had built an invisible net. And in March 1943 6 U-boats sailed straight into it. But victory came at a price. During those same 2 weeks 21 Allied merchant ships were lost. Over 600 sailors drowned in the icy Atlantic. For many death was silent, a brief light in the storm, then darkness. One survivor later wrote, "We didn't see the enemy, only the sea, the cold and the waiting." On both sides men fought not out of hatred but survival. German submariners were often just boys trapped in steel coffins fighting a war they could never win. By early April 1943 the Atlantic began to shift. In that month alone 41 U-boats were destroyed, the highest loss of the war. Donitz called it Black May. The U-boat fleet never recovered. The convoys sailed on. Food, weapons, tanks and men crossed the ocean in an endless tide, fueling the liberation of Europe that would come a year later on D-Day. The Battle of the Atlantic lasted 5 years, longer than any campaign of the Second World War. It was fought not in grand cities or vast deserts but in cold silence between men who never saw each other's faces. 6 U-boats vanished in 2 weeks. But their loss marked something far greater, the moment when the tide of war began to turn. In the vastness of the ocean, courage was measured not by victory but by endurance. The sea remembers. And so do we. For the men who sailed those endless gray waters, their stories are carved into the rhythm of the waves that still break upon the North Atlantic today. Every ship that passes over those coordinates sails above unmarked graves. Beneath them lie hundreds of steel coffins, silent witnesses to the cost of control over the sea. In the decades that followed, the ocean returned to peace. Trade routes reopened, nations rebuilt, and the convoys became symbols of endurance rather than fear. But the lessons of those dark years never faded. Technology triumphed, but at a human price. The battle was not won by machines alone but by determination, calculation and sacrifice. The escorts who stayed at their posts through nights of fire and ice. The air crews who patrolled the endless void searching for a flicker on the water. The codebreakers who worked unseen, decoding the thoughts of an enemy they would never meet. Each piece mattered. Each moment of courage held the line long enough for another ship to arrive, another day to pass, another hope to survive. Today sonar scans reveal the rusting remains of U-boats scattered across the seabed. Their hulls are split, their numbers still visible through layers of silt. Time has softened their edges but not their story. They are reminders that control of the sea was never given. It was fought for minute by minute, mile by mile, heartbeat by heartbeat. And when the tide finally turned, it was not because one side grew stronger. It was because one side refused to sink. The Battle of the Atlantic was not a clash of armies but of endurance. It was the slow heartbeat of the war itself, a struggle that decided whether freedom could survive across an ocean. As dawn breaks over calm water, the horizon looks the same as it did in 1943. But beneath that calm lies history. The wrecks, the ghosts, and the silence of men who changed the course of the world without ever seeing the land they fought for. Their story endures, carried on the waves. The war ended, but the sea keeps its memory. It whispers their names in the dark, reminding us that even in the coldest depths courage leaves a trace that never fades.